Okay, hello Cloud Gurus, and welcome to this lab, where we're going to take a look at how you can connect into and out of a Google Compute Engine instance. So for this lab, you'll need to head into the console with a user account, select the same project that we've been using for our GCS labs, and open the Cloud Shell. Well, alright, I'll see you in the shell. Okay, so here we are in the shell, and like we usually do, we're just going to check which project we're set to use. gcloud config list. And we see that we're using the Services Exploration Labs project. We also notice here that the account is set to use that user Gmail address. Another thing that we're going to take a quick look at before we move on is to see that this home directory doesn't have a hidden .ssh folder yet. That'll come into play later. If you're unfamiliar with the syntax, ls-a will just show us all of the files, including the hidden ones that start with a period. We also want to take a quick look at this Cloud Shell machine itself. If we type "who am I," we find out that the user that's running on this operating system matches up with the user account that we're using for Google Cloud. And if we type host name, we see that the name of the machine that's running our Cloud Shell is this big long thing here. There's one last investigative thing I want to do to find out more about this Cloud Shell. If we type curl, this program is a client program to see any URL. Just like your web browser will reach out to any URL you give it, this will do it from the command line. And the address that we want to enter is api.ipify.org. This is a simple little web address, and all it does is it gives us back the IP address that it sees us connecting from. This tells us that our Cloud Shell machine is connecting out to the internet from the IP address 35.233.169.202. Now, if we copy this URL and bring it up in a new tab in our web browser, we'll see that my computer is connecting out to the internet from 70.71.77.77. Okay, now, with that done, let's check on our instances. gcloud compute instances list. And there's nothing running, which is good because we shut it down last lab, right? Now in the last lab, we typed gcloud compute instances create and then gave it a name. In this case, we'll call it myhappyVM. But if you'll remember, it asks us if we want to use this as our particular zone. Now last time we just accepted this, but this time we're going to say no by entering N and hitting enter. Now it's giving us a bunch of choices, and we really don't want to do this, so we're just going to hit Control-C. Hold down the Control key and tap C. Now another thing is that when we ran the VM last time, we just got the default machine type, and that's not what we want to do this time. Let's bring back that command by up arrowing and then add -H to get the help information. Now we can see at a glance that there are a lot of optional flags that we can use here, like the machine type and the zone. So let's get some fuller information about those. If we change it to --help, then we can scroll through the pages until we find the machine type. Here it tells us that the default type is an N1 standard 1, but we would rather use the free tier eligible F1 micro. So we're going to run this gcloud compute machine types list, which we'll copy to the clipboard, hit Q to exit, paste that in, and then take a look at the output. Now this is a lot of choices, too many really, so we're going to filter this list down. To do the filtering, we could run the output through the grep command like we've done before, but I want to show you something else. gcloud topic filters. This lets us use --filter to specify an expression that it should use to cut down the output. Now you can feel free to hit the spacebar to see all about the different filters that you can run, but I'm just going to show you a couple of things now. We'll start off by adding --filter equals, open a double quote, type capital NAME, colon, and then lowercase f1-micro. Then we close the double quote and run the command. Now that's still too many options, and the free tier is restricted to zones that are in the United States and not North Virginia. So let's up arrow to get that filter back, and then add into the filter capital and space capital zone and then a tilde and then US-West. That'll make sure that the options that we see are all free tier eligible. Now we still have several options, but at least the list is short enough that we can see the column headers, which is something you would not see if you were running the results through grep instead. Well, alright, enough about that. I think we should use US West 2B. We'll copy that to the clipboard, and while we could specify that every time we start a new instance, let's set that as our default zone instead. To do that, we type gcloud config set compute/zone, and the zone we copied, US-West2-B. Now, even though we don't need it right now, it's always a good idea to set the zone and region together. So let's up arrow to that command and change it to also set the region, remembering, of course, to also remove the -B from the zone so that it becomes a valid region. Well, all right, I think we're ready now. So let's up arrow back to the command where we were creating the instance and add in the flag --machine-type, which incidentally we can autocomplete by pressing the tab key, and then specify F1-micro. We let that go and it takes just a little bit to start the machine. Now notice, of course, that it doesn't prompt us for the zone, and it does put the instance into the right place. So far, so good. Well, now let's try to connect to that machine. Ping is a useful tool for this, so let's type ping --C3 so that it uses a count of 3 attempts instead of going forever, and then let's have it ping myhappyVM. Aha, it doesn't know what to make of myhappyVM. Well, what if we ping the internal IP instead then? Let's copy that, paste it in here. It's trying, but it's not getting anywhere. Yeah, that didn't work either. Well, okay, one more try. Let's use the external IP address this time. Well, there we go. That was snappy. So we see that we can connect to that machine, but we can't connect with just the name or the internal IP address. Now, this is an interesting point that'll come into play a lot more later when we look at networking. But for now, just file this in the back of your mind. Well, we've seen that we can connect to that machine using ping, so let's try to connect to that machine using SSH. SSH is the secure shell command. And when we run this, it asks us, are we sure that we want to connect to this machine? We say yes, and it fails. It says that it permanently added that machine's fingerprint to our list of known hosts, but we weren't able to make a connection. Okay, so we do now have a .ssh folder, but the only file it contains is known hosts. So instead of just plain SSH, we're going to use gcloud compute SSH. And instead of giving it the external IP address, we're just going to type myhappyVM, which actually we can even autocomplete with tab. Now when we do this for the very first time, it notices that we don't have any keys that we can use to connect to other machines. And so it helpfully runs keygen for us. Now feel free to type in whatever password you want to use for this, but don't forget what it is. You could leave it empty to make it simpler, but that's really not recommended. Alright, I've typed in my password, and typed it again. Now before I re-enter the key passphrase as a part of this login process, I want to draw your attention to the 2 log lines that say updating project SSH metadata and waiting for SSH key to propagate. Those are really important, but we'll come back to them later. Alright, I entered my passphrase, but maybe I mistyped it. So I'll just rerun the gcloud compute SSH myhappyVM, and this time all I get is the login passphrase prompt, and in I go. So the prompt has changed, and we are connected to the VM. So let's take a look at some of the same things that we looked at in the Cloud Shell. Now if we type who am I, we see that we're logged into this machine with a user account that has the same name, but the host name is very different here. And if we curl to api.ipify.org, we see a different IP address here than we had on Cloud Shell. This one is 35.235.122.8, and if we type exit to log out of the myhappyVM secure shell, and then rerun the curl from outside in the Cloud Shell instead, and remind ourselves of the IP address that it uses to connect to the internet, we'll see that the two addresses are definitely different, but they're a lot more similar to each other than either of them are to the IP address that my computer was using to connect to the internet. Alright, from this Cloud Shell, if we navigate into the .ssh directory and take a look at the files, we see a number of new ones. Now this Google Compute Engine.pub is the public key that was generated, and if we take a look at the Google Compute Engine file, we see that that's the private key and it's been encrypted with a passphrase. Now the public key here is really the key thing because it's what shows who we are when we're trying to log in to the other machine. And if we can't prove that we have the private key that matches this public key when we're logging into the machine, then the secure shell connection will be refused. But okay, now that we've seen this public key of AAAAB3N whatever and then ending in 0BGO6SP, let's gcloud compute SSH back into our VM and take a look around in there. If we cat the authorized _keys file in the .ssh folder, we see the exact same public key that we just saw out in the Cloud Shell folder, but of course no private key. Now if you're not totally following how all of this public and private key stuff works, it would definitely be a good idea to follow up a bit more on this to make sure that you've got a solid understanding of how it works. But the long and the short of it is that the public key can always be public and it identifies you, but you need to have the private key and the passphrase that unlocks that to be able to use that private key to make a connection out. But the question still remains, how did this public key that we generated while the machine was running make its way onto this machine? How did this MyHappyVM know to accept a connection from us? Why would it trust us? And the answer to that is in the metadata that I pointed out was being logged about when gcloud compute SSH was first running. To look into this, we're going to use the curl command again, and we're going to go to metadata.google.internal/compute metadata with a capital M in there, /v1 lowercase, and then a trailing slash. Now when we run this, we see that we get error 403 forbidden. It says that we're not allowed to look at this URL. But the reason is because we're missing metadata-flavor:google. As a security measure, this is a header that you have to pass along when you're making a request for this page. So let's rerun the curl command, but before the address, let's add -H, space double quote, paste in the metadata-flavor:google that we copied from the error message, end the double quotes, and then run it. And now we see that we have instance, OS login, and project. So let's start by looking at what's under project, by rerunning the command and adding project/. Here we see that we have attributes, numeric project ID, and project ID. If we look at the project ID, we see Services Exploration Labs. And if we look in the attributes, we see we have an SSH keys, and that address includes the public key that identifies us. This is how the information about what key we were using was communicated to this instance, even while it was running. Now there's a lot more useful stuff in here. Like for example, you could get the instance name, which is MyHappyVM, and then runs right into the prompt because it doesn't have a new line character at the end. But it also has information about the service accounts. So we can get the address that includes service-accounts/default/ to see that it's got aliases, email, identity, scopes, and token. The default service account for this instance has both a token that it can use to sign API requests, and it's using the service account that was automatically created when we enabled the Compute Engine API. So what this means is that gcloud automatically has a way to connect out from this instance to the rest of the Google Cloud Platform. If we run gcloud config list, we can see that it connects out as this particular service account, and that it's connected to this Services Exploration Labs project. So what does that let us do then? Well, if we gsutil ls, we see the same buckets that we already created. And not only the buckets themselves, but also the objects inside of them. So let's try one more thing. gcloud compute instances delete my happy VM. Did I mean this particular zone? Yes. This instance will be deleted. Yes. And we're not allowed. Would have been fun though, right? Well, in any case, to finish things off, we can grab this command, exit the secure shell, and run it from outside in the Cloud shell instead. Yes. Notice that this time it didn't complain about the zone because it already had a default zone, but it still asks us, are we sure that we want to get rid of this instance? And again, we see we have no more instances running. Well, alright, I hope you found all that to be useful, not only to see how we can wield G-Cloud in a few more ways, but also to see what it takes to connect into a machine, and to see how the metadata service plays a crucial role in all of the communication. As always, if you have any questions, please let me know. If not, please feel free to move on to the next lecture. Thank you.